something else with it. Don't bring it to North Carolina. Well, that's not smart. And at the same time, they're sending money away. They're depriving children and people who are economically challenged of needed health care benefits that in the end benefit all of us, and they are eliminating private sector jobs. And the reason I say that is the money for Medicaid is going to doctors and hospitals who turn around and hire staff to provide the service. Well, if they don't have the money, they're not going to hire the staff, which means that not only are they depriving people of the benefit, but they're killing jobs as well. Well, we're on the backside of the Great Recession, and job loss is both a cause and an effect of a recession. And of course, in the recession, if you weren't African American, you took about a 15 to 17% cut in your net worth. If you were African American, you took about a 54% cut in your net worth. In the jobs that the Republicans terminated, African Americans and women took the hardest hit. And the simple and unpleasant truth of it all is, if you're African American, you have been carrying a heavier economic burden than anybody else all along. In the recession, you got hit more than 3 times harder. If it's in unemployment, you're getting hit twice as hard. When they start firing, African Americans are taking the hit disproportionately. We know that. And at a time when that is the atmosphere, instead of stepping back and saying, we have a problem, not everybody is being treated on the same playing field. Everybody doesn't have the same chance. We need to do this differently. Instead of doing that, what they do is try to put it in the community's face by passing the voter ID bill and gutting racial justice. Now, to some degree, this time around, they came back and did a little something to maybe ameliorate a little of that. And here's what they did. There was eugenics legislation passed back in the 30s. And what it said is if they could identify somebody who somebody would say was mentally challenged or had some physical problem, then, and of course it was at a time before birth control, what they do is they take away their ability to have children. And they do it in some instances by removing ovaries, and sometimes by removing uteruses, and sometimes by castrating young men. And it was horrible, and it went on from the 30s into the 70s, and then finally got stopped. Well, then there were legislators who came forward and said, look, there are people out there who you've deprived of the ability to have a family or to expand their family. And you've forever altered their chemistry and how they get to interact with other people and the rest of the world. And you ought to compensate them for this. And that bill has been around the whole time I've been at the legislature, and even the Democratic leadership wouldn't move it. But finally, this time around, the Republican leadership has moved it. It has gone through the House. It provides not a lot of money. It provides $50,000 to each person still living who had that done to them. Well, most of the people who had it done to them have long since passed away.
Correct.
It does provide some benefit to the families of a few of those people who had that done to them, but not too many. And of course, if I were to suggest to you that African Americans were disproportionately affected by that underlying legislation, wouldn't surprise you at all, would it?
Yes.
Well, that's the truth of it as well. And so there's a minor adjustment being made. But on the whole, the place where the Republican leadership was going was not the place where I thought our society ought to be going. And they were not addressing the problems that I thought ought to be addressed. So I got busy trying to address the problems.
Correct.
Trying to come up with a jobs plan, trying to solve the problem they'd created. And then as I went along and went around the state talking about that, we reached the point where the Democratic governor said that she wasn't going to run. And so when she said she wasn't going to run, it seemed to me the way to continue pressing these issues was to run for governor, and that's what I did.
What was your learning experience that you received through going through that campaign?
Well, it was a great experience. It was an opportunity to meet community leaders like you. It was an opportunity to, I have a legislative district, so I'm out in the district. I'm going to churches, but it's an opportunity to go to other churches across the state, to meet people at all sorts of levels, to talk with people about their concern, to meet folks within the community who are organizing the community to move forward to make good and positive changes that'll benefit everybody. And so it was a great experience in doing that.
You have a passion for fighting for all the people. Where is this coming from?
Well, I told somebody once that I sort of identify with the portion of my ancestors that were Native American. And I figured that what they figured is the only way they were going to get over was to camouflage themselves and get through. Okay. And so somehow they got camouflaged in me. And so part of it comes from that. Part of it comes from the fact that my mother was one of 9 kids growing up in a farming community in Martin County. I got the first Beta Club scholarship out of her county to go to Hardbarger's Business School in Raleigh, and through education lifted herself up. My father was orphaned when he was 12. Went to a national orphanage of an organization his father had been in, came back to the farm when he was 17, went to North Carolina State when he was 19, told him he wanted to start school. They asked him if he could afford it. He told them he had the money for the first semester. When the second semester got there, he'd have the money for that. And so he lifted himself through education. And so my family were hard-working, tenant farmer, North Carolina tobacco farming kind of people who lifted themselves up. And I grew up in a tobacco farm. Now, what a lot of folks don't realize is when you grow up in that situation, everybody, it doesn't matter the color of your skin, doesn't matter your education, everybody's in the field working side by side. Everybody's sweating the same sweat in the same sun, under the same rain, pushing the same bugs aside. And so you grow up side by side with everybody, and you view people for the people they are. On my farm when I was growing up, there were 2 tenant farmers. One was African American and one was not. The one who was not had pretty much raised my daddy after his folks died. And he loved him like a father, I loved him like a grandfather. And on that farm, of the 2 tenant farmers who were there when I was growing up, my dad had the greatest respect, as much as he loved the other guy, had the greatest respect for the African American farmer. He was a man within his church, a leader within his community, phenomenal farmer and businessman in his own right. And so I knew my father respected this man as he loved the other man. And I grew up liking and respecting people for who they are and identifying with folks who've had to come up hard and come up poor and succeed through education. And then when I came along, I worked my way through college and law school. I've been there when you had to look at the penny jar to make sure you had enough money to get the baby milk for the week and food, and then see what you had left over for you and your wife to get through the rest of the week. I've been there. When I go to a church and I see somebody take up a collection to make sure they can pay the light bill for some family at the end of the week, I've been that family. I've lived that part of life.
Correct.
And I'm in a position now where I can make a difference. And as I understand the calling that my religion gives to me, is that the way you serve God is you serve other people. And you take care of their interests and you minister to their interests. And everybody has different talents for it. One of mine seems to be in this area.
Your parents were killed by a drunk driver. How did that impact your life?
Well, it was tough. When you go to law school, and I did, I had always wanted to go to law school because I wanted to be able to get in politics too. Mm-hmm. And you can go to law school and graduate from law school, and that and a cup of coffee, that and a dime at the time, $5 today at Starbucks to get you a cup of coffee. But it won't let you practice law. So to practice law, you've got to go to, you got to take the bar exam. And when I got out of law school, I was as well trained to go practice in New York or California or Georgia or any other places I was in North Carolina, and didn't really know anything about North Carolina law. So the bar review course teaches you about the law of the state you want to practice in.
Correct.
On the last day of the bar review course, I had finished that course, and that was finished 10 days before the bar exam, which meant you had 10 days to go back and review all your notes and try to get ready, because if you didn't pass that exam, you couldn't practice law. And my parents and I were very, very close. And they had gone to the beach. They'd gone down to Arrowhead Campground in Myrtle Beach. We're on their way down there to camp out. They like to go camping. And I had gone to dinner with my then wife and son, and when I came back to the trailer that night, the phone was ringing, and I went in and picked it up. And it was a highway patrolman calling to tell me that a drunk driver had swerved across a lane of traffic and had hit my parents head on, killing both of them. And at the time, I had a sister who was a junior in college, just finished her sophomore year. And I had another sister who was at the time 13 years old. And the one who was 13 was in the vehicle with them and had the impact of her face hitting the dashboard.
Yes, sir.
Blew part of the bone out of her cheek, out through her eye, taking her eye out with it. So lost her eye and the tooth and part of a heel from being burned and the hot oil coming out of that engine, and had her arm broken and had the bone in her leg broken and jammed on top of itself, so they had to put pins in 2 bones and over about 6 weeks pull her legs back apart. And so I had to get her airlifted out of Wilmington up to Chapel Hill, and the other sister was with one of her college roommates in Taiwan. I had to make arrangements to get her back home, and then bury both of my parents and then go take the bar exam. You know, that was a challenge.
Yes, sir.
But in the family I grew up in, you looked after each other. And part of my role was to look after my younger sisters, and I couldn't do that effectively if I didn't go past that bar. And so what I did is I had studied ahead of time, but I never again, from the time they were killed until the bar exam, had the time to study because of all the responsibilities and all the things that had to be done. But I felt like the community had gathered around through prayer and had lifted me up and got me through it. And when you go through a tragedy like that, I guess you see life even more preciously, and you see the value of other people within life all the more preciously.
Mr. Faison, Bill, we're running out of time. I really appreciate you coming on. I hope you can come back. You know, and I'm totally honest more because I feel like you'll be a great governor. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks, Paul.
Yes,
I
sir.
appreciate it very much.
You're more than welcome to come back.
All right, well, I'll do it. I'd love to come join you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bill Faison. Thank you for watching the show, and you be encouraged. Thank you.